Hi, today we're going to be going over the purchase and sales agreement. So I'm going to get right into it and share my screen. Bear with me while I get on the right page. Okay. So I believe everybody can see the screen that you have in front of you. So it should be the purchase and sales agreement from Eastern and Connecticut Association of Realtors. And we're going to go through it from the very beginning and highlight how to fill it out and some of the points in the boilerplate that I think you should be aware of to help protect you and your clients. So let's just dive right in. So the buyer, obviously we'll put the buyer's name in. So it would be Joe Smith. And if there's another buyer, it could go here. Okay, then their address, they lived on 123, ABC Street in Groton, CT 06340. The seller's information you can get from the MLS information on, it's either on the disclosures or you can go into Realist and find it. We'll go through that in another video, but let's just assume that the seller is Debbie Jones and that she lives at 25 Crestwood. Pawcatuck. Okay, so you tab through and put that information in. The seller, this is where the seller agrees to sell and buyer agrees to purchase certain real property known as, this is the property that you're putting the offer in on. So we're going to assume it's Debbie's house at 25 Crestwood Lane in Pawcatuck, Connecticut. It's located in the town of Stonington. There are some towns where this name and this name are going to be the same. Like it would be, if it was Voluntown, it would be Voluntown. The volume and page number is what you're going to find on the Realist card. We'll go through where to find that. Actually, I might, well, I can't show it to you right now, but we can go through that in another video. But you'll find that on the Realist tax card, it'll state volume and page number next to the last sale date or the last recorded mortgage. Okay, so the purchase price, let's assume that the purchase price is $400,000. The client's going to put down the initial escrow deposit of $1,000. Many times the seller is going to ask for more money than that as a deposit, especially if they're doing some sort of conventional financing or cash. They're going to ask for bigger deposits. I personally, if I'm representing the buyer, I want to put down as little money as possible for the initial deposit, because at the end of the day, that money is always at risk. Meaning, even if the client does everything right and they do their home inspections and they meet all their dates and they decide this isn't the house they want based on the condition of the property during the home inspection, they just found too many things wrong. Even if they do everything right, they send in the release of deposit, the cancellation of the contract, they're supposed to get their deposit back. Legally, if the seller does not sign off on that release of deposit form, that money sits in escrow. Therefore, I want to limit that risk to a small number at the beginning. And then we'll put down an additional deposit after all the inspections are complete and remedies are agreed to. So under item B, I would put see Article 21. And then when we get to Article 21, we would add language stating that we'll put down the additional deposit after inspections are complete. Okay, item C is the amount you're going to be financing. So let's assume for, this example, they're putting down 20%. 20% of 400,000 is 80,000. That means they're going to be financing 320,000. There's no seller financing. That would be 0. And this item E, the balance, is what your buyer would be bringing to closing. So if they're putting down an initial $5,000 deposit and they're financing 320, they would be bringing to closing another 75,000. That doesn't take into account closing costs. Don't even get yourself confused with it. This is just what they'd be bringing to the table to satisfy the purchase price. This is their loan, their initial deposit, what they're bringing to closing. The key to checking these numbers are items A, B, C, D, and E should add up to the purchase price. So when you add up $1,000, $4,000, $320,000, and $75,000, you get the $400,000 purchase price. So we did it correctly. Okay. Financing. This is one of the 2 ways that the buyer really has to get out of the contract. So this financing contingency is very important. If it's a cash deal, you simply check off cash. If it's not, then you're going to use mortgage. It's a mortgaged finance contingency. We're going to skip over B for now. So mortgage type, you have to, you know whether it's conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, or a renovation loan. And is it fixed or a variable rate? Is it CHFA? Is there down payment assistance? The number of years that the loan is going to be amortized over and the number of points. So I typically, let's just assume we're doing conventional for this purchase and sales agreement, I would put in prevailing. That means that as long as they're not required to get a subprime loan, but if the interest rates are 3.5%, that's when they lock in, that's what they're willing to take the loan out for. 30 years, 0 points. If some buyers agents will put in, 3%. Oh, bear with me. It's not letting me change it. There we go. They put in 3%. My question as the listing agent would be, what if the interest rate goes up in 2 weeks to 3.5 or 4? It's dangerous to have such a low number in there or really tight to what the current rate is, because then they have the right to cancel the contract. So my question to the buyer's agent would be, well, I need that number to change and either say prevailing, or what is the most they're willing to pay in an interest rate. If it is 3%, only 3% of the current rate, but we have 2 other offers, that could weigh heavy on the decision that the seller might make as to what you offer to accept. Okay, so the mortgage contingency. This is another important item. I believe, in my opinion, this should be, 2-3 days max. 4. This is the amount of time that the buyer agrees they will have to make the application. If they don't make the application to the mortgage company, they're not going to meet a lot of the dates in the contract. So that's super important. And they're in default if they fail to do this. And then your mortgage contingency date for your mortgage commitment. This is important. I usually go out about 4 weeks. If it was a USDA or a CHFA, I might go out 5 or 6 weeks. You could come see me if you have questions on those specific types of loans. Typically for a regular FHA, a regular VA, or a conventional, I would go out 4 weeks for a mortgage commitment date. That means that if they can't get their full mortgage commitment by this date, you have to get that date extended, because if you do not, then your client's deposit is at risk. They no longer have a financing contingency that they can cancel the contract under. This is a very, very important date. So never let this date expire without getting an extension if you do not have full mortgage commitment. Okay, so moving on in this boilerplate clause under mortgage contingency, you'll see I highlighted the buyer grants permission to the lending institution to provide status of his or her loan to the agents involved in this transaction. This is really important to know that this is in this clause because there are going to be times where you might be the listing agent and you need an update from the mortgage broker as to the status of the loan or if there are any issues. You're not asking for personal information or credit information. You just want to know the status of the loan. So you might have to reference this because the buyer is giving permission to both agents to get an update from the lender. So keep that in mind. Okay, Article 3, the appraisal contingency. You're going to check off whether this is not subject to an appraisal. And that's really the only time that's going to be the case is if it's a cash deal. Cash deals, you can still make them subject to an appraisal. You would check off D. So we're going to check off D because it's not a VA or an FH deal, FHA finance deal. And then the appraisal date, we're going to put just a few days before the mortgage commitment date that we entered. Okay, and this is another date that you need to make sure we don't miss. If the appraisal is not done and in to underwriting, if we don't have the results, the value by this date, you need to get an extension on that date. Otherwise, they don't have the right to cancel based on the findings in the appraisal. All right, I mean, the financing contingency might kick in, but if they're doing conventional, it's super important that you follow this date. So they're putting 20% down. It could affect, whether they can get out of the deal. So just don't let this date, bottom line is, don't let this date come or go without getting an extension if the appraisal is not complete. Item 4, seller credit for buyer closing costs. That's where you put if you are asking them to pay any money towards buyers' closing cost prepaids or escrows. We're going to put 0 for the case of this contract. But if your buyer was asking for $5,000 towards closing cost credits, that's what you would put here. And you would put the whole number, no negatives or anything in there. Closing, item 5, Article 5. This, I would go out 5 to 6 weeks. We're going to put warranty. You can leave that blank if you don't know what type to put in there. I always put warranty. And then the closing date. So if we're going out the 7th, I might go to the 14th, okay? And just understand that that's an on or about date. Okay, adjustments. I'm not going to worry about commissions. This is where you're going to put our agency and the other agency, ABC Real Court, okay? And the seller's agent information, you could put in as well as your information. Encumbrances. This is where, what they mean by encumbrances is if there's any sewer assessments, water assessments, or gas assessments that are going to be attached to the property, you want to make sure that you have an agreement that who's paying those. Are they going to be assumed by the buyer or is the seller going to pay for them at closing? So if you want the seller to be responsible, you need to specifically say seller. And then we can type in any here. Unfortunately, you got to go into each one because it's a fillable PDF. Okay, fixtures and personal property. So here's where you're going to want to pay attention to what's included here, just so you know. So when you do the final walkthrough, you know whether they have the right to fight over something that may have been removed. So basically what conveys in all contracts, unless otherwise excluded, are all fixtures which are including but not limited to screens, storm doors, storm windows, satellite dishes, carpeting, blinds, curtain rods, fixtures, awnings, shades, automatic water heaters, built-ins such as the dishwasher, oven range, microwave, etc. Garage door openers and remote controls are fixtures. Obviously, plumbing, lighting, heating, and air conditioning, excluding like window units, and plants and shrubbery. So the big thing I tell my sellers is if you don't know whether it should stay or go, ask. But I tell my sellers that curtain rods and the hardware all need to stay because you can't leave those holes in the walls. You could take the curtains themselves, but shades and curtain rods and hardware need to stay. Plants and shrubbery need to stay. If you're going to be digging up specific plants to take with you, just disclose that and make sure it's listed somewhere in the contract or the inclusions exclusions report. Sheds. Now, this doesn't say anything about sheds. So when I put in a contract, I'm going to say, you know, exactly what I want included. So I might say TV wall mounts and sheds. And if I wanted the freezer, the washer and dryer. Washers and dryers are not automatically included. A lot of buyers get upset because they assume they are not. If they're specifically stated in the MLS, then they are included. But if they're not stated and you want them, you need to put them here. I always include sheds or outbuildings because I did have an instance where somebody took the shed and we ended up fighting over it at closing. So now I don't make that mistake. Buildings, sorry. Hi.